It was past 2 a.m., and the penthouse was as silent as the grave it was built above. Outside, the city never slept. Headlights flashed like fireflies far below the glass towers. But up here, in the highest suite of the obsidian-black Olympus residences, there was only hush. A hush so heavy it pressed against your chest like stone. YN tossed in bed again, tangled in sheets too soft to comfort her. Her chest was tight, breaths shallow, sweat clung to her collarbone even though the temperature was perfect. The nightmare had been brief, just flashes. But in them, he left. Jungkook's eyes, always so unreadable, had been the last thing she saw in the dream. Cold, walking away from her as glass shattered behind her, as blood pooled, as voices screamed, and then silence. She couldn't breathe. YN sat up, her nightgown clinging to her damp skin. The silk whispered against her thighs as she slipped her feet into slippers and padded across the marble floor. The hallway lights flickered on as she walked, responding to her motion, bathing everything in soft gold. She walked past the lounge, empty, past the grand piano room, untouched. Finally, she stopped outside the mahogany double doors of Jungkook's office, the place he ruled his empire from, where men came in suits and left in silence, where secrets lived, and where love never reached. She could hear muffled voices behind the door, serious tones, deep and gruff, a meeting. At this hour, she hesitated. One knock wouldn't kill him, would it? Her fist hovered near the door. She paused. Then she knocked, once. Silence inside. Then the door opened. Not fully, just slightly. The guard glanced down at her, then nodded. "He's inside, ma'am." YN swallowed her pride and stepped through. The air in Jungkook's office was cooler than the rest of the penthouse, like stepping into a room carved from stone. A long black conference table stretched across the floor, papers spread out, monitors glowing faint blue. Around it sat 6 men, all powerful, all silent. At the head of the table stood Jeon Jungkook. Black shirt, rolled sleeves, loose tie. Tattoos peeking from his wrist. His hair slightly tousled, but not a strand out of place. His expression? Ice. When his eyes met hers, something flickered. Annoyance? Surprise? Concern? She wasn't sure. She just knew she needed him. "YN," he said, voice even. "This isn't a good time. I had a nightmare." The room fell into a hush. The men didn't speak. They wouldn't dare. Some looked away. One cleared his throat. Suddenly, uncomfortable. Jungkook blinked once. Then, he exhaled and walked to her. He didn't say anything, just brushed a thumb under her eye where the tears had dried. "Go back to bed," he murmured. "I'll be there in 10. But his eyes darkened slightly. 10 minutes. She turned and left before they could see her tears. Back in their bedroom, YN paced. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. She walked to the window, pressed her palm to the glass, stared out at the world below. Could the people down there even imagine what kind of lives were lived in these towers? She wasn't sure she could anymore. This wasn't just a marriage, it was a power play, an alliance, a crown placed on her head, made not of gold, but secrets. She sat on the bed, clutching the pillow close. He used to hold her like this, back when the world was simpler, before the throne, before the blood. Finally, the door opened. She looked up. He stood there, his tie now gone. The top few buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing the smooth lines of his collarbone and the beginning of the black ink that curled over his chest. "I'm sorry," he said softly. That startled her more than anything else. "You're never sorry," she replied. "I know." He walked in slowly, like he was entering a battlefield, not their bedroom. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. "I didn't want to be cruel." But you were. He looked at her then, eyes soft now, not cold, not calculating. Tell me about the dream. She hesitated, then, I was in a hallway. Alone. You were walking away. I called for you. You never turned around. He was quiet. You've left me before, Jungkook, she said quietly. Emotionally, I mean. You shut me out. But in that dream, you didn't just shut the door. You disappeared. He nodded once. And when you woke up? I needed you. She didn't cry. Not yet. But he knew it was close. Jungkook leaned in, his forehead pressed lightly against hers. You are the only real thing I have, he whispered. That's what scares me. She froze. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. Not passionate. Not hungry. Just real. He kissed her back. Gently. As if he were afraid to break her. As if maybe he knew she was the one thing in his life too precious to crush. He pulled back. I'll stay tonight. No more meetings. You promise? He didn't hesitate. I swear it. They didn't make love. Not tonight. They just lay down, together, under the silk sheets, her head on his chest, his hand in her hair. No guns, no guards, no empires, just silence, just breathe, just them. Before there were towers, before there were penthouses, before there were blood-soaked boardrooms, rainy street, and a girl who didn't know she was being hunted. 1 year earlier, Busan dockyards, midnight YN tightened her coat around her, heels splashing in shallow puddles. Her hands trembled. Not. Fro glanced over her shoulder. Nothing. But the wind carried whispers, heavy footsteps, a scent of gasoline and something metallic. She walked faster. Her phone had no signal. Her cab had dropped her off 2 blocks down. A shortcut, the driver had said. Liar. She was alone now, far from the party she'd attended, her dress soaked under her coat, her instincts screaming. Then came the voice. Pretty night to die alone, isn't it? She spun around. 3 men emerged from the shadows. Leather jackets, knives. The leader wore a wolf pendant around his throat, jagged and shining in the streetlight. Who are you? She demanded, masking the fear in her throat. Doesn't matter, he said, grinning. What matters is you shouldn't have walked through our territory. You're from the wrong family. I don't know what you're talking about. Your father made a deal, didn't pay up. You're the tax, sweetheart. He grabbed her wrist. YN kicked, screamed, thrashed, but she wasn't trained. And they were ready. A gunshot. Then another. The man in front of her dropped. The others turned, and then a blur moved through them. Fast. Clean. Precise. She didn't see his face at first, just the way the last man fell, neck twisted unnaturally, and the sound of silence that followed. Then he stepped into the light. A black suit, soaked with rain, a gun in one hand, a glare that could slice glass. His hair was damp, his lips set in a flat line. Jeon Jungkook. She stared at him, breathless. Are you hurt? He asked. I don't think so. Good. He turned away, pulling out a phone. It's done. 3 bodies. Dockyard B. Dispose discreetly and send the car. YN watched as he holstered the gun like it was second nature. Why did you save me? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, Because I don't let trash like them touch what doesn't belong to them. She didn't ask what that meant. She just knew that 5 minutes later she was in the back of a black car, being driven through neon-lit streets. Her wet dress clung to her thighs. She shivered. Jungkook sat beside her, silent. Until finally, what's your name? Y or N? You're not safe anymore, YN. Because of what just happened. Number because now they know your face, and you were connected to a debt. What does that mean? He met her eyes. It means if you go home tonight, you'll be dead by morning. She didn't sleep that night. She stayed in one of his apartments, sterile, sleek, with more cameras than furniture. Jungkook was in the room across the hall. She should have been afraid of him, but all she felt was the strangest, sharpest calm. Over the next week, he kept her under watch. He never flirted, never even touched her. But every day, someone brought her fresh food, clothes, books, phones encrypted and untraceable. And every night she heard him talking, on the phone, on the balcony, in low voices behind closed doors. He was making people disappear. For her. On the 8th day, she finally confronted him. "I'm not a hostage," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "No, I don't need protection. You did. And now?" He paused, looked her over. Now she wore his hoodie, his slippers. Her hair was messy. She was raw, angry, alive. In cold, but from the growing sense that she was being followed. "Shh. Now," he said quietly. "You're something else." She moved toward him. "Tell me why you're doing all this." "Because the men who touched you were part of a group I despise. Killing them was personal, but keeping you alive? That's something else entirely." "Is this a transaction?" she asked bitterly. "You save me, and I belong to you." He stepped closer. "No," he whispered, "but if you stay, you'll never belong to anyone else again." She kissed him, and he kissed her back like he was starving. The next morning, he told her to marry him. Not with flowers or rings or smiles. Just a contract. Cold, signed in the ink of survival. Back to present day. The penthouse YN lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Jungkook was fast asleep beside her, one arm lazily draped over her stomach. He never looked this soft, not to the world, not even to his men, but to her. Sometimes she saw the man from that rainy night. Not the king, just the night, just him. The morning sun glittered through the tinted glass of the penthouse like shards of broken mirrors. YN sipped her espresso in silence, seated in the breakfast nook overlooking the skyline. The table was already perfectly laid, silver cutlery, cut fruit, fresh croissants. But her appetite hadn't shown up with the daylight. Jungkook hadn't said much since waking, just a quiet kiss on her temple and a phone to his ear before disappearing into the back office with a grim look and words she couldn't hear. YN watched the city blink beneath her, steel and glass, towers like fangs. Pretty, but fragile, just like this empire. She had learned something in the months since she married Jungkook. Power didn't make you safe. It made you a target. And this morning, she could feel something wrong in the air. A tension that hadn't been there the night before. His guards were doubling up on posts. The blacked-out SUVs idled longer in the driveway. Even his most trusted right-hand man, Yoongi, kept checking his shoulder like a blade was following him. YN stood from the table and made her way to the hallway outside Jungkook's war room. She wasn't allowed inside during meetings. That had always been the rule. But today, she pressed her ear to the door. Just once. "He sold us out," Yoongi's voice was sharp. "Ravi leaked the cargo routes. The ambush last night? That was inside work." A pause. "I'll take care of him myself," Jungkook replied, calm but deadly. Quiet, clean, no trail. YN's breath caught. They were talking about killing one of their own. Someone Jungkook had worked with for years. Someone who had stood beside him at their wedding. How could trust vanish like that? How fragile was loyalty? She pulled away before they heard her. Back in the bedroom, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You're the weak spot. He knows it. They all do. You should leave before it's too late." Her heart dropped. She read it again. And again. Then she deleted it. By nightfall, the tension had grown claws. Dinner was quiet. Jungkook barely touched his food. YN couldn't stop glancing at the window. Every sound outside made her flinch. "Jungkook," she finally said softly. "Am I safe?" He looked up. There was a pause before he spoke, a long one. "You are with me." "That's not the same as being safe." His jaw flexed. Then he stood, walked to her side of the table, knelt before her like a knight, and took her hands. You are the only thing I've ever been afraid to lose. I don't make promises I can't keep. But this, YN, I will fight hell to protect this. That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did he. At 3:27 a.m., the security alarm chirped once. Not a breach, just a warning. Someone had come, within 20 feet of the penthouse elevator, with a restricted keycard. Jungkook was up instantly, gun in hand, shirtless, barefoot, terrifying. Y or N followed him to the security room, holding her breath. The screen showed the hallway cam. It was Ravi, but he didn't look armed, just confused, nervous. He stood outside the elevator like he had second thoughts. Yoongi appeared on the screen next. One shot. Ravi dropped to the marble floor. Y or N gasped. Jungkook didn't even blink. He watched his empire handle itself like it was chess. Pawn sacrificed. Board cleared. He turned to her, slowly. You weren't supposed to see that? I was the reason, wasn't I? He didn't answer. Because, yes, she was. They returned to the bedroom. Silence like a blanket. But that night, for the first time, she pulled him into her arms. Not the other way around. You kill people, she whispered into his neck. Yes. You'd kill for me? I already have. She didn't cry. She just kissed his temple and held him tighter. And for the first time since she'd met him, Jungkook trembled. The walls of the penthouse had never felt so thin. In the morning light, Jungkook was a shadow, pacing near the glass balcony, phone glued to his ear, issuing orders in clipped, quiet tones. His black shirt was half-buttoned, sleeves pushed to his elbows, and his eyes, usually unreadable, were rimmed in red. He hadn't slept. Neither had she. But the reason was different now. YN sat at the edge of the bed, fingers twisted in the hem of her robe. Everything in her world felt like it was built on glass. Beautiful, expensive, fragile. And tonight, another crack had appeared. Jungkook hung up the phone. We need to talk, she said before he could speak. His brows lifted. About what? About you. She stood, facing him. You're bleeding inside, Jungkook, and you never let it show. But I see it. You take care of everyone else, every deal, every danger. But when do you let someone take care of you? His expression tightened. The wall was going up. I'm not fragile, YN. I never said you were. He moved toward her. Then what is this? You want me to fall apart? Cry in your arms? I don't have that luxury. You have me. She stepped forward, chest rising with emotion. You can bleed, Jungkook. I won't run, I won't flinch. But if you keep pretending like nothing touches you, someday I'll believe it. And you'll lose me. Not to bullets or enemies, but to your silence. That hit something. He looked away. And for a long time, neither of them said a word. Then, softly, so quietly it nearly vanished, he spoke. I didn't cry when my mother died. Y or N blinked. I was 13. She was the only softness I knew. My father didn't come to the funeral. I stood there, stone-faced. Everyone thought I was strong, but I wasn't. I was just numb. He looked at her now, something raw in his voice. I've been numb ever since. YN stepped forward again, cupping his face in her hands. You're not numb now. He didn't answer. She kissed him gently, not out of passion, but out of gratitude, for showing her the wound he'd never let anyone see. Later that night, they attended a private dinner at one of Jungkook's high-rise safe houses, a rare public appearance for the both of them. YN wore an elegant midnight blue dress that shimmered like moonlight. Jungkook's hand never left the small of her back. His men watched every corner. The air buzzed with tension, but her fingers threaded through his under the table like a lifeline. But halfway through the meal, Jungkook's phone buzzed. He stiffened. What is it? She whispered, Hike. Stay behind me. They were halfway out the restaurant door when the gunfire started. Glass shattered, screams, men shouting in Korean. Jungkook shoved her behind a marble column as bullets hit the walls around them. 3 of his guards fell. One screamed. "Where is she?" Someone yelled in the chaos. They weren't here for money. They weren't even here for Jungkook. They were here for her. Jungkook's eyes blazed. In a blur, he pulled out his weapon, fired 2 shots, rolled across the floor, and shielded her as more bullets tore through the glass. Then silence. Yoongi's voice crackled over comms. "All clear. They're down." Jungkook didn't move. He was still shielding her with his body, even though the threat was gone. She looked up at him, eyes wide, heart pounding. "You okay?" he asked, voice hoarse. She nodded. "I told you," he whispered. "I'll fight hell for you." And in that moment, on a blood-stained marble floor in the ruins of a private dining room, she kissed him like she never had before. Back at the penthouse, they didn't speak. He undressed her slowly, not with lust, but reverence. He held her in the shower until the water ran cold, and when they finally lay down together, limbs tangled, hearts racing, there were no games, no power plays, no shadows. Only this. 2 souls who had been hunted, haunted, hardened, trying to feel again. The city below glowed like a constellation in motion, glittering and restless. But inside the penthouse, everything was still. YN sat on the windowsill in a soft cotton robe, knees tucked to her chest, staring out into the velvet sky. She hadn't spoken much since the ambush. Her body had stopped trembling, but her soul hadn't. Jungkook stood nearby, shirtless, quietly nursing a cut on his forearm with a black cloth. It wasn't deep, but she could tell it stung. His jaw was tight. It always was after blood. "You saved me," she said at last. His eyes met hers in the glass reflection. "You're surprised?" "I'm not sure you've ever told me why you do it." He paused. Then, "Because I know what it feels like to be thrown away." Y or N turned to him. Jungkook leaned against the edge of the table, gaze far away. "You ever heard of Na Hye-jin?" She shook her head slowly. "She was the girl I first loved. I was 17. She was 20, a little wild, the kind of girl who made you believe the world could be soft if you loved hard enough." He smiled bitterly. "I thought I was protecting her, thought I was giving her everything. What happened?" "I introduced her to my world," he said quietly. "Taught her how to read codes, handle weapons, keep secrets. She was brilliant, addictive." He looked down. "And she sold me to a rival gang for a suitcase of money." Wire N's breath caught. "She poisoned my lieutenant, gave our codes to the Vasari family. That's how my brother died." He met her eyes now, raw, exposed. "She ran the night the betrayal was discovered, disappeared. I haven't seen her since, just whispers, rumors." Y or N crossed the room to him. "I'm not her, Jungkook." "I know." "Then why do you still treat love like a liability?" His voice was barely audible. "Because when I love, people die." She took his injured hand in hers. "I didn't die. I stayed." He didn't move, but his eyes, always guarded, shimmered like ice melting for the first time. That night, they sat on the couch in the lounge with nothing but city lights washing their skin. He let her curl into his side, and for the first time, his arm wrapped around her without hesitation. They said nothing. Words were too small for the ache in both of them. An hour passed. "Can I ask something?" she said softly. He nodded. "Do you believe in love?" He didn't answer right away. Then finally, "I don't know if I believe in safe love." "What do you believe in?" He looked down at her. "Dangerous devotion, the kind that survives betrayal, bleeds, but never breaks." She exhaled slowly. "That's what I feel for you." A beat passed. Then he whispered, "Then maybe I believe in that too." Later that night, he touched her face with hands that had destroyed men, but handled her like glass. They didn't make love, not in the way stories describe, They just held each other until the silence became soft, until both of them believed, just for one night, that maybe the past didn't always win. The next morning began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that follows a storm and waits for another. YN stood outside Jungkook's office doors, arms crossed over her chest. She could hear the conversation inside, muffled but urgent. The words shipment, threat, and false flag cut through the thick oak like bullets. She hated not being allowed in. She wasn't a doll, she wasn't glass, and she was done being protected. When the door opened, Jungkook stepped out, surprised to see her waiting. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Not really. You should try." "Not until I know what's happening." He exhaled. "It's not your concern." "But it involves me, doesn't it?" "YN, no more locked doors," she said, quietly but firmly. "You told me last night that you believe in dangerous devotion. I'm here. I'm yours. But that goes both ways. If I'm going to bleed beside you, I need to know why." That struck him like a blow wrapped in velvet. He didn't respond. Not at first. Then he stepped aside, held the door open. "Come in." The war room was a world of its own. Blueprints, encrypted files, maps with red X's and glowing dots. Monitors streamed footage from warehouses, ports, and underground lots. Armed men sat at the table, heads turning when she walked in. YN didn't shrink. She sat beside Jungkook at the head of the table. "Talk," she said. Yoongi smirked slightly from across the room. "I like her." The room came alive with information. A port in Busan had been compromised. A scheduled arms transfer, the one Jungkook had trusted only 3 lieutenants with, had been intercepted. Not by cops, but by someone worse. "Another family?" she asked. "Worse," Jungkook replied. "The Vasari syndicate. European, ruthless, and they know we're stretched thin after the ambush." "But how could they know your cargo schedule?" Yoongi looked grim. "Someone leaked the list." Jungkook's voice darkened. "Which means someone inside this room." The atmosphere turned to ice. That night, YN waited until Jungkook was on a call, then slipped quietly into the elevator to the garage floor. She'd overheard enough. She knew a name, Kang Jaemin, one of Jungkook's newer lieutenants, the one who looked too clean, too polished. He'd been stationed near the docks last week. She found him at the lower office suite, sipping whiskey like he owned the world. When she stepped in, he froze. "Mrs. John," he said, "you're not supposed to be—" "Cut the act." "What?" "You sold out the shipment." He blinked, then smirked. "You think your husband doesn't already know that? He's just letting me sweat. Testing you." Her stomach twisted. "You admit it?" "I admit nothing," he said, standing. "But I know how this ends. You tell him. He has to kill me. But if you walk out now, no one has to know. We can both live." She narrowed her eyes. "You're right," she said. Then she turned and slammed the butt of a vase into his jaw. By the time the guards arrived, Jaemin was unconscious, bleeding on the floor. YN stood over him, lip bleeding from a scuffle, arms trembling. Jungkook burst in moments later. "What did you do?" he breathed. "What you weren't ready to," she said, panting. "I burned the rules, for you." He stared at her. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her tighter than he ever had. "I didn't want this world to take you," he whispered. "I stepped into it, Jungkook, eyes wide open." That night, she sat on his lap in the war room, reviewing intel with him. Yoongi walked by once and chuckled. "She's scarier than you," he muttered. Jungkook smirked, fingers brushing hers. "I know." The penthouse lights were low, casting long golden shadows across the marble floor. Outside, rain painted the windows again, slow, steady, familiar, like a memory looping back to where it all began. Jungkook and YN sat on the edge of the bed, facing each other. No guards, no phones, no empire between them, only silence and truth. "You scared me today," he said quietly. YN smiled gently. "Because I hit your traitor with a vase? Because you weren't afraid to." He studied her. "When I married you, I thought I was giving you safety. But I see now. You don't want safety. You want truth. I want you, she said. Even if I'm fire? She reached up, brushing his cheek. Then teach me how not to burn. He kissed her. Not urgently, not angrily. Software focused. Endless. She leaned into it, hands on his jaw, and he pulled her closer until there was no space left between them. The room melted away. The world fell quiet. There were no weapons on him now, no mask, no orders being barked through earpieces, just Jungkook, just the man, not the boss. I need you to know something, he whispered against her lips. I've never let anyone close, not like this. She nodded, brushing his hair back. I don't want to be close. I want to be inside. He smiled for the first time that night. Not the smirk, not the smothered kind. A real one. He helped her out of her robe like it was sacred silk. She helped him unbutton his shirt like a promise. There was no rush, no performance, just learning each other like pages in a book no one else would ever read. He touched her ribs and said, "You're trembling." "I'm not afraid," she breathed. "Just full." "Of what?" "You." They lay down together on the couch, bare skin beneath cashmere throws. The windows around them stretched high above their heads, wrapping them in stars. Jungkook kissed her collarbone, her shoulder, her wrist, then pulled her into his arms. "We won't survive this world," he whispered, "not unless we're one." "Then let's be one," she replied. Outside, the rain turned heavier. Inside, they tasted each other like rain after drought. Slow, reverent, addictive. And long after their hearts slowed and their breaths softened, YN rested her head on his chest and whispered, "This feels like home." Jungkook looked at her like he finally believed in such a thing. 3 days had passed since YN shattered the rules to protect Jungkook. Since then, the entire penthouse had shifted. The guards looked at her differently, not with confusion or pity, but respect. Yoongi offered her updates without being asked. Even the older lieutenants nodded when she entered the war room. She wasn't just Mrs. John anymore. She was a part of the empire. But what surprised her most was how Jungkook changed too. He touched her more often now, a hand on her waist, a thumb grazing her lower back as they walked past his men. He sat beside her in meetings. He let her read encrypted files. It wasn't romantic. It was recognition. Trust. Power shared. One night, just after midnight, Jungkook brought her to the rooftop garden, a place so secluded that even Yoongi rarely entered. The skyline stretched around them like a halo of light. In the middle of the stone path was a bench carved with dragon motifs. She sat. He didn't. Instead, he knelt in front of her, pulling a small velvet box from his coat. "I don't kneel easily," he said, voice steady. "But for this, I will." N's eyes widened. "Is that—" He opened it. Inside wasn't a ring, not at first glance. It was a small gun pendant. Silver, with a black onyx grip, the initials YJ carved into the side. "I had this made months ago," he said, "but I didn't give it to you, not until I was sure." "Sure of what?" "That you didn't need protection. You needed partnership." He clipped the chain around her neck. "It's not a weapon. It's a symbol. You don't have to earn your place beside me. You already have." N's hands trembled slightly as she touched the pendant. "I've never wanted to rule," she whispered. "You don't have to," he replied. "But if they come for you again, and they will, they need to know who you are." He stood. "You're not a queen behind a king." He leaned close, lips brushing her ear. "You are the bullet in his chamber." That night, they danced in the garden. No music, just moonlight and wind. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't practiced, but it was theirs. Later, in the bedroom, Jungkook watched her from the doorway as she changed into one of his black shirts. The pendant rested against her chest, just above her heart. "You look dangerous," he murmured. She smiled. "I feel dangerous." He walked to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Then we'll be dangerous together. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in silk and starlight, the city humming far below, two broken people finally fitting into one whole. The ballroom shimmered with wealth and danger. Velvet drapes hung like royal cloaks from gold-trimmed ceilings. Crystal chandeliers cast diamonds across champagne flutes. The guests were sharks in silk, mafia leaders, allies, enemies pretending not to be. And in the middle of it all stood Jeon Jungkook, the shadow prince of Seoul, dressed in tailored black, his wife at his side, the flame the shadows couldn't swallow. YN wore a crimson gown that clung like war paint. Her silver gun pendant glinted above her heart. She walked beside Jungkook without flinching, chin high, eyes sharp. She wasn't playing a role tonight. She was his, and he was hers. The gala was meant to signal strength, a show of unity between the Jeon Empire and its delicate network of truce-bound families. But YN could feel it, the cracks beneath the marble floors, the sideways glances, the too wide smiles. It was a game of masks, and someone was about to drop theirs. "I don't trust this," she whispered to Jungkook as they moved past the dancers. "I don't either," he said. "But if we don't show up, we look weak. Sometimes strong men walk into traps on purpose." He glanced at her, amused. "Are you calling me reckless?" "I'm calling you mine," she replied, slipping her hand into his. He smiled. "Then I guess I can't die tonight." The ballroom darkened as the main speech began. Jungkook stood on stage to address the room. YN remained near the edge, Yoongi beside her, eyes scanning the exits. Jungkook's voice echoed smooth and measured. "We are not here to remind the world we have power. The world already knows. We're here to show them we can build peace, so long as that peace is not mistaken for weakness." Applause. He stepped back. The crowd shifted, and then a gunshot. The moment shattered like glass. Y or N's scream was swallowed by chaos. People dropped to the floor. Guards drew weapons. And Jungkook fell. Blood bloomed across his shoulder. Yoongi dragged her down. "Stay low!" "No, he's hit," she cried. She pushed past him. Another shot rang out. Missed. Jungkook was conscious but fading. His men swarmed the stage. Sirens echoed. Smoke grenades hissed. It was war, disguised as ceremony. They got out through the service exit, YN clutching Jungkook's blood-soaked hand in the back of the SUV. He was pale. He hadn't said a word. "Stay with me," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. YN. His voice was faint. "You don't get to leave me. Not after everything. Not after you made me your shadow and your storm." He gave a small, weak smile. "You're all of it." At the private clinic, he was rushed into surgery. YN sat in a waiting room that smelled like alcohol and war, her dress torn, her hair wild, her hands stained red. Yoongi paced. It was internal. Someone close. The shooter knew exactly where to aim. Not fatal, but meant to warn. Warn who? You! 3 hours passed. Then the surgeon appeared. "He's alive. The bullet grazed the lung but didn't puncture. He'll be weak for a few days, but he's going to be fine." Y or N collapsed into the chair. Tears finally spilled. Not from fear, from relief. When they let her in, he was asleep. Machines beeped in slow, steady rhythm. His skin was warm under her touch. She leaned down, brushed his lips. "I told you not to die tonight," she whispered. "And for once, you listened." The room was quiet but not still. Machines hummed, soft and slow, measuring the rhythm of Jungkook's healing heart. Rain tapped gently on the tinted windows, a mirror of the storm they'd survived the night before. YN hadn't left his side. She sat curled in the leather armchair, a blanket draped around her, the silver gun pendant still around her neck. Her fingers traced the cool edge of the hospital ID band on his wrist. His name looked foreign in black print, too clinical, too real. Jeon Jungkook. Patient number 1209. Gunshot wound. He stirred, eyes fluttered open. Slow, hazy, confused. Then he saw her, his voice cracked. YN. She was at his side in a heartbeat. Hey, she said softly, smiling through tears. You scared me. You're still here. Of course I am. He reached for her hand. She took it. You should have run, he whispered. You didn't sign up for this. No, she said, squeezing his hand. I signed up for you? That includes every bullet and every ghost that comes with you. He closed his eyes. A tear escaped, sliding silently into the pillow. She had never seen him cry. Not once. You weren't supposed to see me like this here. He murmured. But I needed to, she replied. You protect everyone. You bleed for people who would never bleed for you. I needed to see that you're human too. He looked at her, really looked. And if I never recover? She leaned in, brushing her lips against his forehead. Then I'll carry the empire for both of us. Later, as the painkillers took hold, she curled up beside him in the narrow bed. Not as a lover, not as a wife, as a lifeline. His hand found hers in the dark. You've changed, he said, voice barely above a breath. You made me stronger. No, he murmured. You were always strong. I just got out of your way. That morning, while he slept, she called Yoongi to the hallway. I want to know everything, she said. Every name on the guest list. Every camera. Every license plate. Yoongi raised an eyebrow. You want to run the investigation? Number I want to end it. Yoongi gave a short nod. Understood. By the time Jungkook woke again, the pendant was replaced by something new. A ring. Steel. Sleek. Inscribed with his name. I made it for you, YN said, slipping it on his finger. He stared at it. Then at her. What does it mean? It means this time I make the vow, she said. To love you. To fight for you. And if the world tries to take you from me again, her voice broke. I will become every storm they fear. Jungkook pulled her close. And for the first time since they'd met, he said the words he'd never dared. I love you, YN. She didn't answer with words. She just kissed him. Long, slow, infinite. Because some promises didn't need to be spoken. They were written in scars and sealed in blood. There's a weight to peace when it follows violence. A heaviness in the stillness. Jungkook recovered quickly. Too quickly, the doctors had said. But YN knew it wasn't just stubbornness that brought him back. It was the unfinished story between them. Still, some wounds didn't bleed. They sat quietly in the garden the day he was discharged, surrounded by white roses, sky overcast, hearts both fuller and heavier than ever. YN placed a cup of tea on the table between them. There's something I haven't told you, she said, looking at the horizon. Jungkook didn't flinch. Then tell me now. She took a deep breath. When I was 19, I worked for a small diplomatic firm. We helped translate and smuggle documents across borders. I thought I was doing good. I was wrong. She looked down. One of the files I carried, it got a man killed. A real one. A whistleblower. I didn't know. I was just the carrier. But I found out later. The information I moved led to his death. Jungkook was quiet. Then, why didn't you tell me? Because I thought if you knew I had blood on my hands too, you'd look at me differently. He stood slowly, walking toward her. YN, he said, voice low. You think I'd love you less for understanding the cost of loyalty? She swallowed. I didn't want to become what I hated. He brushed her cheek. You didn't. You became what you had to be. Then he took her hands. I have something too. She looked up. I didn't just inherit this empire, he said. I stole it. Her breath caught. My father wasn't going to pass it to me. He chose my older brother. I loved him, but I saw what this world was doing to him, turning him cruel, paranoid, dangerous. I had two choices. Let him burn the empire to the ground, or take it from him. He looked her in the eyes. I chose the second. Y or N's heart beat painfully. Did you kill him? No, Jungkook said, shaking his head. But I exiled him, banished. Sent him away with nothing but the clothes on his back and a warning never to return. And if he does? Jungkook's eyes darkened. Then I'll finish what I started. They stood in silence. 2 confessions, now floating between them like ash. Then YN took his face in her hands. I don't want perfect, she whispered. I want real, and I want you, with every scar, every wrong choice, every sin. He pressed his forehead to hers. Then you'll have all of me, from now until the end. That night, no guards patrolled their door. No weapons rested beside the bed. No codes. No lies. Just 2 people, lying side by side. Nothing between them but heartbeats. And for once, that was enough. 6 months later, the world no longer whispered Jungkook's name, it chanted it. Under his leadership, the Jeon Empire had become unstoppable, a machine of silence and fire, devouring every threat with precision. But what they didn't whisper, what they didn't dare say aloud, was the real reason no one dared to cross him anymore. It wasn't just Jungkook, it was her. YN Jeon, the bullet in his chamber, the quiet storm beside the king. No longer just a symbol, no longer just protected. She stood with him in every negotiation, deciphered every coded message, read every enemy's face with a strategist's eye. Together, they were power, not just feared, respected. The war room had changed. Now it held a second chair at the head of the table. Hers. Yoongi no longer looked surprised when she made decisions. Jungkook no longer flinched when she spoke first. And when a rival family sent a threat across the border, it was YN who composed the response. Come for him again, and I'll write your bloodline out of history. Personally. Jungkook had framed the letter, but not all power is loud. Their nights were still quiet, still filled with small glances and whispered truths, still sacred. One night, as the city glittered beneath the penthouse windows, Jungkook stood behind her as she reviewed intel, his arms wrapped around her waist. You built this, he murmured. We built this. Number 1 was fire. You were the map. She turned to him, smiling. Then let's burn everything we don't need. They took down corrupted allies, removed unstable suppliers, streamlined everything. By winter, the Jeon network had grown so lean, so sharp, it didn't need defense. It was a sword, and they were its hilt. At a gala in Milan, YN spoke to international bosses in flawless French, while Jungkook leaned back and watched her work. She's terrifying, one whispered behind a glass of wine. Jungkook smiled without looking. I know. They had rewritten the rules of mafia politics. No mistresses, no backroom bargains, only strategy, loyalty, 2 hands gripping the same crown. But the cost of power is always interest. And shadows don't stay buried forever. One night back in Seoul, Jungkook entered the war room to find a letter placed on his desk. Unmarked. No return. He opened it. Inside, a photo of his brother, alive, armed, and walking the streets of Istanbul. Jungkook's hand curled into a fist. YN walked in, saw the look on his face. What is it? He handed her the photo. She stared at it, then handed it back. Then we go to Istanbul. The war room had never felt colder. The long table was cleared of maps and files. In their place, a single photograph and a stack of sealed red folders. Jungkook stood at the head, one hand flat on the table, the other curled tightly at his side. YN watched from the corner, arms crossed. She knew that posture, that stillness before the storm. Yoongi spoke first. If we move on Istanbul, we draw fire from 2 other families under his protection. We're talking about a regional war. Jungkook didn't blink. We'll survive it. And if it's a trap, then we spring it and break every piece of it on the way out. Y or N stepped forward. And what if you die? That froze him. He looked up. I don't plan to. Plans break, Jungkook. You taught me that. He studied her, her strength, her fury, her fear all sitting behind her eyes. He's not just an enemy, Jungkook said. He's my brother. I've been running from this since the day I exiled him. If I don't finish it now, it'll bleed into everything we've built. Y or N moved closer. Then we do it together. Istanbul. Fog-laced rooftops. Whispered meetings in crumbling cathedrals. Money flowing through marble mosques like ink and holy water. And at the center, Jeon Jungkook, Jungkook's older brother, exiled, forgotten, but not dead. YN watched Jungkook walk through the darkened hotel suite like a different man, cold, silent, bulletproof in posture. Are you sure you can do this? She asked that night as he sat by the window, staring at the Bosporus below. I'm not doing it for me anymore. She waited. I'm doing it for us. The next morning, their convoy rolled through narrow stone streets. Jungkook stepped out in full black, gloves, coat, mask of command on his face. The abandoned villa at the edge of the city felt like a tomb waiting to be filled. Jihoon stood in the middle of the courtyard, arms crossed, smirking. Well, little brother, still dramatic, I see. YN stood just behind Jungkook, hand on the pistol tucked into her coat. But her weapon was her silence, her stare. Jihoon's eyes flicked to her. This the girl? The one you built your little glass castle for? She's the reason I'm not a monster, Jungkook said coldly. But I'm willing to become one today. They spoke for 11 minutes. Jungkook offered exile. Again. Jihoon laughed, then pulled a gun. And everything went quiet. Yoongi was faster. One shot. Jihoon dropped. YN didn't flinch. She walked to Jungkook, who stood frozen, not from fear, from grief. He was my brother, Jungkook said softly. No, she whispered. He was your shadow. And now you've stepped into the light. That night, they returned to Seoul. Jungkook didn't speak for hours. Then, just before dawn, he crawled into bed beside her, buried his face in her neck, and whispered, Promise me you'll stay. Even when I'm no longer king. She kissed his temple. Even when the crown is ash, I'll still choose you. The war was over, but what remained was more dangerous. Silence. Not the fragile silence of before. This was the quiet that follows a final battle, the kind that forces people to sit with what they've become. YN stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, wind curling her hair, soul glittering far below. She held a glass of wine, untouched. Her mind was full. Jihoon was gone. Enemies silenced, their empire stronger than ever. And yet she felt weightless. As if the version of her who once stood trembling at Jungkook's office door no longer existed. She heard the soft footsteps before she turned. Jungkook, barefoot, black shirt, a shadow and a man in one. You're thinking again, he said. I never stopped. He walked toward her. You saved me, he murmured. I stayed. That's more than saving. She turned to him, heart wide open. What are we now, Jungkook? He stepped into her space, slow, deliberate. What do you want us to be? She didn't hesitate. Whole. His hands slid to her waist, thumbs brushing slow circles on her hips. Then let me show you what it means to be truly mine, he said softly. No masks, no games, just us. YN's eyes didn't leave his. Then take everything, she whispered. And I'll give everything back. He kissed her like he was claiming not just her lips, but her history, her grief, her fire. And she kissed him like she was undoing every lock he'd ever hidden behind. They didn't rush. They undressed each other in silence. Soft touches, lingering fingers, a button undone, a kiss placed over a scar, a hand tracing the shape of devotion across bare skin. When Jungkook laid her on the bed, his eyes weren't full of heat. They were full of worship, as if he couldn't believe she was real, as if he'd never trust anything again the way he trusted the sound of her breath. She pulled him down to her, whispering, "No more pretending." And he replied, "Then I'll show you what it feels like when a man who never believed in love learns how to." They moved together, not for dominance, not to forget, but to remember. Every moment was slow. Every look was loud. Every heartbeat was heard. Hours later, tangled in sheets and sweat and the soft aftermath of unspoken vows, Jungkook brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and said, "You're not just my empire." She blinked up at him, barely breathing. "You're my home." 1 year later, the empire no longer needed a crown, because the king and queen no longer needed thrones. The penthouse remained, high above the skyline, but it wasn't the war room anymore. It was quieter now, softer, filled with books, music, light, and laughter. YN stood barefoot in the nursery, holding a tiny shirt in her hand. The walls were pale gray. The windows looked out over the sea. There was no gold trim here, no marble, just warmth. Her hand rested on the soft curve of her belly. 7 months. A boy. Jungkook leaned on the doorframe, watching her with that rare, unguarded smile. "Are you nesting?" he teased. "I'm editing your legacy," she replied. "Oh?" She turned to him. "No blades in the baby's room, no portraits of dead rivals, and definitely no safes behind the toy shelf," he chuckled. Spoil sport. But he crossed the room, took her hand, and pressed a kiss to her palm. "You've changed everything," he whispered. "So have you." Later, on the balcony, Jungkook lit 2 candles, not for show, for the ones they'd lost, his mother, his brother, the people he couldn't save, the version of himself that used to believe he was beyond redemption. YN placed a small photo beside them, the first picture they'd ever taken together. Blurry, rain-soaked, just after he'd rescued her. "I kept it," she said, "even when I didn't know who you'd become. And now I see who you became." He looked at her. "And who's that?" "A man who broke the world to build something worth living in." Their nights were simpler now. No meetings, no blood, just quiet dinners, chess games, stories read aloud from dog-eared novels. Jungkook still carried a weapon, but it stayed in the drawer, untouched. "Just in case," he always said. The world still feared his name. But they no longer whispered it with hate, because Jeon Jungkook had stopped building an empire of shadows. He'd built a kingdom of light instead. When their son was born 2 months later, the hospital suite was surrounded by silent guards and overflowing white roses. Jungkook held the baby for the first time with trembling hands. YN leaned over him. "He has your eyes," she whispered. "He has your strength," he replied. Then he kissed her forehead. "And he'll have our peace." That night, back in the penthouse, YN stood at the window, their newborn asleep in her arms. Jungkook wrapped an arm around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You remember the dream you had?" he murmured. "The one that brought you to my office that night?" "The nightmare?" she asked. He nodded. "What about it?" He kissed her cheek. It ended, and this began. In the silence that followed, as the city breathed below them and a baby stirred gently in his sleep, YN said the only thing that could ever match the journey they'd walked: "We were never the monsters." And Jungkook replied, "No, we were the ones who survived them,